Thank you very, very much.
I have to wait till it goes. And taking a little bit of time. Let me just run.
There we go. Like the next 2 weeks.
Done.
Next 2 weeks.
This way a little more. You just had.
Thank you. Next week I'm including.
Problem is, not looking there at the camera.
I should look at the camera there. Should we move the camera over? Good? Yeah.
So you do something.
Some of them are much worse than others.
Well, somehow, of all the things in this yeshiva that do move, this one chair doesn't move. It's always right here, and you put the seat up.
Okay, good morning. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Be'ez Hashem, I hope to give share next week and the week after. There'll be 2 more additional shares for this year, for the summer. Also, I have to pay up my debts. Simple cheshbon is this is the first share we're doing this year, totally devoted to a personality. And we've averaged 3 over the past, 6 years. So, on personalities. So, if I do a personality this week, next week, and the following week, I pay up my debts, I can sail off into the sunset. So, that's my plan. You with me? Okay. Now, today's share is, I think, really about a personality. If you went back, he was nifter in the early 1960s. If you went back to the 1960s, everybody in Eretz Yisrael in America would know of him. In the 70s, still know of him well. 80s, you go back years and years later, with Tzvi Pesach Frank, who should be a household name, might be somebody that's somewhat forgotten. Somewhat. But Tzvi Pesach Frank, the share is entitled The Rav of Yerushalayim, is somebody that hopefully will go through some halachas, so we'll see that his impact in Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael in general, and really the world was a tremendous, tremendous impact. But sometimes in life, it's a certain mazel, and some people are well known, some people are less well known. And
Which part of the mazel?
you're right. Which is the better mazel is a good question. And I'll show you in a moment. I think with Tzvi Pesach Frank, as you astutely said, actually chose the path to be less well known. It's not something that just history took over. It was a choice that he made in his lifetime. And I think hopefully today's share will, just by talking about him, obviously people in the know, in the Olma yeshivas, in the world, people with knowledge, but the average, 18-year-old bacher, 30-year-old balabas, they might have known a couple of heterim, I'm ashamed of Tzvi Pesach Frank. They don't really know who he is. And I think today's share would also do well for people to listen and to learn about an amazing, amazing personality, a person who is known in his generation as the Posek HaTorah. And before we get into understanding and learning from halachically this Posek, let's first do a little bit of a biological background. He was born in 1873 in Kovna. The significance of that, he grew up a classic Litvisha yeshiva bacher. He learned in the Telz yeshiva. Later, he was influenced by Rav Shimon Shkop. He even met and was influenced by Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. So much so, in 1892, his family moved to Eretz Yisrael, which means he was 19 years old at the time, really young bacher. And it seems like for the next decade and a half, he was zocha to just sit and learn, to the extent in 1907 he was appointed by Rosh Shmuel Salant, the Rav of the old Yishuv of Eretz Yisrael, to serve on his Bezdin, and dine on his Bezdin. 1907. Careful, I have a real historian in the room. I see he's processing each date. But to understand Eretz Yisrael a little bit, the way I get it, is the old Yishuv of Eretz Yisrael was a lot influenced by the Vilna Gaon and his Talmidim that went there, and people living in Yerushalayim, other spots, but it wasn't what we have today. It was a very poor, obviously very simple community, city. And came in this, immigrant from European-born young Talmud Chacham, Tzvi Frank, and he foresaw in Eretz Yisrael the possibility for a lot of growth. And I'll give you one amazing example, which I didn't know of until I did research on this. The old Yeshiva Eretz Yisrael had a few yeshivas, right? One of the famous yeshivas, Eitz Chaim, Yerushalayim, we'll see in a moment. That was okay. One old Israeli yeshiva. But if you look at what Yerushalayim of Eretz Yisrael is today, it benefits a lot from European influence of Talmidei Chachamim, really whole yeshivas that emigrated and moved to Eretz Yisrael. One of the first, if not one of the most famous, yeshivas that moved to Eretz Yisrael was the Slobodka Yeshiva. The Slobodka Yeshiva, which was a powerhouse in Europe, the Alter Slobodka, Yeshiva Moshe Mordechai, amongst others, moved the yeshiva to Eretz Yisrael, actually first settling in Hebron. Fortunately, in 1929, there was the infamous Hebron massacre, where people in the city of Hebron were killed, including Yeshiva Bachrim. And after that tragedy, the Hebron massacre in 1929, the Slobodka Yeshiva moved, called the Hebron Yeshiva, moved to Yerushalayim. And the Hebron Yeshiva today stands at Given Mordechai in Yerushalayim. Used to be also being in Geula.
Probably the second biggest yeshiva in
Yeah.
Eretz Yisrael, third in the world, probably.
Yeah. The Hebron Yeshiva is a major yeshiva.
Over 1,000 bahu.
And I didn't realize until researching for this year that Tzvi Pesach Frank was one of the big influences who talked the Slobodka Rosh Yeshivas, the Alter, to move the yeshiva, come to Eretz Yisrael. Look what they have. He was a Litvish grown yeshiva bacher, now Talmud Chacham, and he was influential in moving the yeshiva. I think it's quite fascinating that who stands at the helm of the Hebron Yeshiva today? It's someone named Rav David Cohen. We'll see it soon. Rav David Cohen is a great-grandson of Tzvi Pesach Frank. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu pays back. Rav David Cohen married an American girl. Rav Hutner was a shadchan. He didn't have any direct connection within the, let's call it, the ownership of the yeshiva of Hebron. He was a top Talmud of the yeshiva, no question about it, the Gedolei Hador. But with Tzvi Pesach Frank helped guide the Slobodka Yeshiva to Eretz Yisrael. A few generations later, his great-grandson is at the helm of that yeshiva. But another major element that Tzvi Pesach Frank was involved in doing was setting up the office, the idea of having a chief rabbi. Tzvi Pesach Frank was a big pusher and a force in setting up the chief rabbinate and the appointment of Rav Kook. Rav Kook served as the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel. That was something that Tzvi Pesach Frank pushed, encouraged, so much so, it's quite fascinating that after Rav Kook was nifter, who would be the next chief rabbi? But Tzvi Pesach Frank was offered that position. That was the point in time that Tzvi Pesach Frank had to make a decision. What should I do? Should I become chief rabbi? Or should I continue what he was doing? At that point, he already was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. Should I give up Yerushalayim? And what that meant was his dedication, being able to sit and learn, versus becoming the chief rabbi, which is a bigger position with more responsibility. At that point, he made that life decision. I think it's better for me to stay here. That's what he did. He stayed in that position. He helped and organized who became the next chief rabbi of Herzog. And, okay, that was history. I'll tell you one other. Okay, so he was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. At the same time, and this we'll talk about more a little bit later, at the same time there was chief rabbi. Now, he was chief rabbi in Yerushalayim for decades upon decades. But at a certain point, he was offered a second job and a second title, which he did take. Of Bezdin of the Ida Charedis. Never in the history, and probably never again in the history, will you ever have a situation where the chief, maybe Moshe Mashiach, but the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, which is an official rabbinut position, and the Ida Charedis, which represents the most right-wing Haredi stance in Yerushalayim, was shared by the same person. This is obviously somebody, even back then, will show he was literally a man who built bridges. And this wasn't something which he took and didn't last. This lasted over 2 decades. So Tzvi Pesach Frank was somebody who literally was living in 2 worlds. Chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, involved in the rabbinut, involved with the chief rabbis of the state of Israel, at the same time with the Ida Charedis. Absolutely amazing.
When did he become chief rabbi of Jerusalem?
So I'm not sure. I didn't find an exact date. Probably could find it. I didn't look for an exact date when he became the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. But he was appointed to Bezdin in 1907, and the chief rabbi.
So who appointed the chief
I assume
rabbi?
He was in the Eda Charedis in 1907.
No. He was on the
The
Bezdin in
The
Yerushalayim
state rabbi did not become
till
a
after the state.
position till after the state.
Right.
So it had to have been after 1948.
Yeah.
Even during the time when the
If he was
British,
the first
the
one.
British mandate
It was not called chief rabbi.
Now, just to give one perspective,
It wasn't,
how great a person Tzvi Pesach Frank was, after he was nifter, who would they seek to take over his position as a chief rabbi of Yerushalayim?
it wasn't so about.
Do you want to know? No. Who did they seek? He became chief
Rabbi of everything.
right. Well, who did they seek to become the next chief rabbi of Yerushalayim? And I checked up this story, and I have it down. 2 people know about the story. I have intimate, and I found from a person who heard it directly from the person involved. Moshe Feinstein had a Talmud named Nota Greenblatt. The Greenblatt recently was Nifter, amazing person from Memphis. He grew up in Yerushalayim. His family,
Him?
he was very close to Rav Moshe. At the same time, he had good connections in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Moshe Feinstein, I have to look at the list. Rav Moshe Feinstein sent Rav Nata with a message to speak to Rav Moshe's nephew. Rav Moshe had a nephew who actually was in America and worked with him in his yeshiva in MTJ, named Rav Michal Feinstein. This Rav Michal Feinstein got into the most VIP circles in Eretz Yisrael. He married the Brisker Rav's daughter.
That helps.
That helps. So he married the Brisker Rav's daughter. He was super involved, everything going on in Yerushalayim. But Moshe asked Rav Nata to ask Rav Michal, does he think it's a smart idea for himself to take a position that was offered to him?
So offered to Rav Moshe.
Rav Moshe Feinstein was offered the position to become chief rabbi of Yerushalayim after Tzvi Pesach Frank. And that's something that Rav Moshe considered. And not the Greenblatt was an emissary to ask Rav Michal Feinstein, what should I do? And Rav Michal said, I have the quote, I'll say it in English, that you'll have more of a hashpah in America than you would in Eretz Yisrael. Moshe asked, if I take this vision, you think I have a big hashpah? And Rav Michal said, I think you have more of a hashpah in America where you are. The prophetic words. This was early on by Rav Moshe. This was before
1948. You must be 1960.
1960. Okay, so Rav
Passed away
Moshe.
86.
86. Yeah. 1960 to later, it was the midpoint of Moshe being in America. And he was considering, when he switched venues, maybe we should move to Eretz Yisrael to take over that position. Gives you an inkling of who this Tzvi Pesach Frank was. So what I'd like to do now, with that introduction, I would like to focus, like we try to do by these halacha shirim, focus on three aspects that make this posik unique. And from that, hopefully, go through different halachas, we'll see a perspective of who this halachic giant of Tzvi Pesach Frank was. Now, first Mar Makom you have on your sheet is not a normal Mar Makom. Usually the Mar Makomos you give is from, I would say, the body of the Sefer. This Mar Makom I give you is from an index of the Sefer. With Tzvi Pesach Frank, Kanana Hara, and I'll get to in a moment who's responsible for this. There are an absolute library of Sfarim you could find from Tzvi Pesach Frank. His Shalosh Teshuvos, there are a Sfarim called Har Tzvi. Could sign this name. Sorry. Probably the most popular Sfarim, which they recently reprint, different style, is Mikroi Kodesh. Those are halachic discussions, Lamdasha, Yeshiva type halachic discussions on all of the Moadim. They also have Shabbos now and Yantif, but all the Yom Tovim, fascinating halachic discussions over the years. I give many shirim. Well, the Mikroi Kodesh is a well-used sefer. There are countless other. So I'll show you, introduce you to a sefer soon. Mikdash Melech.
Is that all in Hebrew?
Yes, I do. I haven't checked the English, but like many things,
Don't worry, Art Scroll's working on it.
they're behind the times. Put for care. Maybe after the share, if everyone hears who Tzvi Pesach Frank was,
Talk to Rabbi Grossman.
Yeah, but one thing so fascinating, and I feel bad. They redid the Mikroi Kodesh. They didn't ask my opinion. They redid it, and the back they have a mafteach, which is literally an index, which is literally 200 pages long, like on such a diverse amount of topics, just on this set of Svarim, not his Shalosh Teshuvos, not all the other ones, just the Mikroi Kodesh. They have a mafteach, which is way thick. This is just an index.
How many volumes?
Huh? 10 volumes.
Yeah, I thought it was like-
Yeah, they added to it.
5, 6,
Yeah, okay. Lamaisa, they indexed just based on topic. They did not index based on personalities that he quotes. And in each individual volume, almost each, maybe on the earlier ones I saw he did it, there's a page which he acknowledges all the names of the Rabbanim that he quotes inside the Sefer. And these Rabbanim were modern day Rabbanim that he was interacting with. Not Svarim he was quoting. Modern day people that he was interacting with, learning with. You have never seen in a Sefer such a diverse group of people quoted. This is my first point to understand who Tzvi Pesach Frank was. The Achtos, Rav Kook, because he was close to him, he had a connection to him. Well, at a certain point, that picture was taken down from the sukkah. Not sure was it the family itself took it down, or Kanayistic Zealot students took it down. But hey, I could have been a sukkah in Brooklyn. I could have a picture of Cook. This is, come on. You open up in the Mikra Kodesh, and it came out every volume has a quote or 2 or 3 or 4 by Rav Kook. He interacted with him a lot in learning. Rav Avram Farbstein, mainstream Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron. The Aderes, famous, again, Haredi. Rav Yohu Rom, such an amazing story. And you know who I heard the story from? I can't believe I found it. It's the fun part, doing research for a share. I heard this story straight from Rav Avadia Yosef. It's on the video. Tzvi Pesach Frank was a young Talmid Chacham. It came to the point he wanted smicha. So one of the biggest gedolim in Yerushalayim was Rav Yohu Ram. It was a big family Adayom. He was the Av Bezin of the Badatz. So the Tzvi Pesach Frank went to him and asked, "Could you faher me? Could you test me? I want smicha." This Rav Ram was an older man, a sickly man, and said to him, "I apologize. I'm an old man. I don't have the strength. A smicha bechina, like those days, right? That's at least a day's worth of just spending time with the young Talmid Chacham, questioning him for hours and hours and hours on end, and it takes a lot. He's an older Rav, an older man. I'm sorry, I don't have the strength to do it." So Tzvi Pesach said to him, "Okay, can I at least tell you over Dvar Torah? Can I tell you over a Chiddush?" He said, "Fine." So Tzvi Pesach Frank tells him over a Chiddush. I was going to leave. Rav says, "Wait, where are you going? I want to faher you." And Tzvi Pesach said to him, you told me 2 minutes ago, you're tired, you're weak, you don't have the strength to sit for a day and ask me and spend time 12 hours a day testing me to see if I'm up to being a Rav, to getting smicha. What you just did by telling me over that piece of Torah enlightened me, inspired me. Now I have the strength. Rabbi Avadia Yosef told over that story. I'll find it online. Rabbi Avadia told over that story. You saw the strength that the older Rabbi Avadia Yosef and the excitement he was getting saying over the story. Who heard of Rabbi Yoel Ram? Well, if you read the Svarim of Tzvi Pesach Frank, he's there all the time. Not just Al Sakar Satovi Gam Smicha, but he learned from him.
Could I ask you to go back for a second?
Sure.
To clarify something. Earlier you said regarding Rav Kook, you said, how could you see a person with a sukkah in Brooklyn with a picture of Rav Kook on it, right?
Yeah.
And it was taken down also from his other chavirs that he said.
Well, it's his own
right.
sukkah, that person's.
Is this a political statement? I'm not understanding why you wouldn't want a gadol
Now,
like that. A picture
now
on your
give
sukkah.
me, right.
Is it, if that's redundant, I'm sorry. But
Right.
I don't get why.
So I'm gonna explain this issue in a moment. Okay? Excellent point.
Yeah,
You'll see in a moment as the share moves on. I'm gonna add more. Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin. Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin was a tzaddik yisod olam, a person who they say could look at a tree and see all the leaves. Holy Jew. Definitely part of what you call the Eida Charedis of Yerushalayim. Yechiel Michal Tikachinsky, who's famous for his shitas in calculating time, zmanim. He also wrote the Eretz Yisrael Lulach, as well as the Sefer Gesher HaChaim. They named the street in Yerushalayim after him, Gesher HaChaim.
He didn't do it, but he's the one in Maizmanim. He
Yes.
put himself there, but he's
Correct, that's his manim.
His man.
We have Yitzhak Isaac Halevi Herzog, the second chief rabbi of Israel. Isn't his grandson, great-grandson?
Great-grandson.
His great-grandson is currently the president of Israel. Right? That is definitely a political position.
He's not so religious.
And people might say things, yeah? Okay?
You missed Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld.
Yeah. He quotes it. Oh, right. No, right. Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld.
The leader, the actual of the Charedim.
Right.
When Rav Kook was made chief rabbi, the Charedim realized the Charedim didn't have anybody in charge, and they realized once the Mizrahi, whatever, picked Rav Yosef Chaim Rabbi Kook, they said we better get somebody ahead of us. And the Charedim all got together, as diverse as they were, and they put in charge of themselves Rav Yosef Chaim Zon. He was the absolute leader, a Talmud Muvak of Rav Yerushalayim.
So let me say over, make sure everyone hears the audience, what Rabbi Fried, a Talmud Chacham, a historian, said over, that Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld was the person that the Charedim of Yerushalayim put up after Rav Kook was appointed chief rabbi of the state of Israel. He was put up as the opposition. He was a student of Yerushalayim Diskin. So you're talking about, again, this is Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank is literally walking between the two worlds. He has Rav Kook, Rav Herzog on one side, Rav Yerushalayim Diskin, and Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld on the other side. I'll show further. Okay, Yerucham Fishel Purlau, famous paper she wrote on the Sajigon Sefer HaMitzvos, a Rav that came from Europe, or Menachem Mendel Kesher, someone who wrote the Torah Shlema. He also wrote a Sefer against the Satmar Rav and his position on the state of Israel. Shlomo Yosef Zevin. Shlomo Yosef Zevin, also considered a religious Zionist, the head of the Mizrahi yeshivas. I found in quote that they say that he had a full meal on, he made a Sudas mitzvah on Yom HaAtzmaut. He also is probably the one person that fits in that category, who has a book published by Art Scroll, Ma'adim B'Halacha, and I think he also wrote books about Hasidish Maisalach. I think he's also Shlomo Yosef Zevin. Quite a fascinating person. So, what's going on here? I'm not here, this is halacha share, not a political share. I do think, obviously, look, there might be halachic or hashkafic differences between different camps in Eretz Yisrael, no question about it. There's obviously a lot of political differences between different camps in Eretz Yisrael. And there are many different issues. I'm not going to go into, major discussions about the army. Has been a flashpoint since the beginning of the state. And one of the people that I mentioned here, I'll leave out. I found a letter of his, which again, assuming he wasn't doctored, talks very strongly against the classic Haredi position of Yeshiva Bachim not serving. This was written in, the person who wrote the letter was right after the War of Independence, when everybody's life was on the line. And they were aghast, where's there room for another position? But again, these are, I'm not here This is a halachic share. What I want to show from this is an amazing aspect of the Tzvi Pesach Frank, that he was able to bridge gaps in Torah between all these people. Now, I'm not saying that Tzvi Pesach Frank had these two people sitting at the same table and he was debating halacha between the two of them. But he was somebody that went to everybody and anybody. If you're a Talmud Chacham, if you have halachic opinion, I want to know it. I want to learn from you. And that's why it's so fascinating. Chazal say, if you're Mevi Davar B'Shem Omro, it's Mevi the Gula. If you say something over in the name of who you heard it from, it brings a Gula. He doesn't leave out names. If he heard something, whether it be from the chief Rabbanut rabbi, whether he heard it from chief Eda Charidus rabbi, it's quoted in the Svarim. Because Torah is equal, Torah is Torah. And if it's emes, if this is a valid interpretation of the Torah, I want to learn from it. Such an amazing, I'm not sure there's a personality that had such a diverse background of people that he interacted with. It really shows what the old yeshiva of Eretz Yisrael was. I don't know a person could easily replicate this today. There are those that try, and there are certain people that are accepted in all circles, but Tzvi Pesach Frank was so unique in this area. You read his Svarim, it's just mind-boggling. You just see that list. A second area, I'm watching the clock. A second area, and I think, look around the room, it's a good mashal. You know, here, the South Florida Jewish community, right now it's bursting at the seams. Right, every summer, a little more people want to come and move their families to South Florida. Okay, I have some people here in the room that have been living in South Florida for quite a few decades. The difference in perspective between somebody who comes now versus somebody who's been here decades ago is that people come now, they see a world and think, okay, they always look like this. The people who came decades before, no, it's not so. You visit Yerushalayim. Who doesn't want to visit Yerushalayim? One of the most amazing cities in the world. And it has a certain spice to it. Not all the cities in Eretz Yisrael are the same. Obviously, there's Kedusha. I'm not getting involved. You know, Yerushalayim has more Kedusha than everything else. Sure, no question about it. But just practically what the society is. There's a major difference between Yerushalayim and Bnei Brak. They're two different feels if you go to that city. That you could feel without registering how many levels of Kedusha you feel. They're all holy cities from our book. I don't know, sure we can tell the difference in Kedusha. But you see something different between the cities. The early Rabbanim, and amongst them with Tzvi Pesach Frank, who was the Rav of Yerushalayim, was the Posek Hador of his times, played a major role in defining for Yerushalayim to be the city that it is today. I found two simple examples in halacha. One I put on your sheets, one I didn't. I mentioned it. I'll do one. How do you deal with electricity on Shabbos? It's a big problem. On the one hand, okay, you obviously want to, it's a major deal on Shabbos to have light. That's why I would light Shabbos candles, right? You don't want to live Shabbos in the dark. On the other hand, unfortunately in Eretz Yisrael, due to the fact that it is a Jewish state, but not everyone in the state is Shomer Shabbos. So you have irreligious Jews who work for the power company and help provide that power. So you're benefiting from the lights, from the electricity on Shabbos, perhaps. We'll talk a little bit about the topic. I don't have so much time to go through it in depth. But you're benefiting from work done by Jews. What do you do? So in Bnei Brak, they have a simple solution. Not so simple, but they get around it. They're all on generators. They refuse to get benefit from the Israeli power companies, and they were on generators. Now, that's easier today in 2024, where the world is living on a better standard financially. Even in the super poor city of Yerushalayim, of Bnei Brak, they have some generators. What went on 50 years ago, 60 years ago? Wasn't as geschmack. Kerosene lamps, in the dark, a different type of living. Okay? That's a halachic perspective. Bnei Brak is a city built on the Chazon Ish. And that was his halachic and hashkafic perspective. But Yerushalayim, and I found the tshuva in Har Tzvi Chelak Aleph, where he was posed to Sham not just for Yerushalayim. He was on the post Gador. I believe the Shiloh was from Tveria, Tzvas, one of the cities up north. Asked also, what should they do? And Tzvi Pesach Frank mattered using the electric company. It's not the Chal, the Gzeira, the Asring, things done. In general, he was a Rav who understood the technical side of it. The electricity produced for Friday night is coming from Friday day, and you're not doing anything wrong in having that. The Shiloh is maybe after Shabbos and this. But Lamaisa, when Tzvi Pesach Frank mattered it. Okay? Yerushalayim looks different than Bnei Brak. Another interesting Shiloh. Just one of the most beautiful things. People love visiting Eretz Yisrael in Yerushalayim, during Hanukkah. Great time. Take a little break. Especially in some places, the weather's warmer. If you went to Yerushalayim, instead of being in the winds off Lake Michigan.
Right.
So there he has a Shaila. Look at on your Minig Yerushalayim on the right side, most bays. Shemahajim Majrikim B'chutz L'Pesach Habayis B'Ashishis Shel Zchuches Seguris Shesh Bo Pesach B'Sad. Right, people light their menorahs outside in these little glass boxes, which have an opening on the side. And when they light it, they open that door. And as soon as they finish lighting it, they shut it. He says, but people ask on this, and they bring in the name of the Chassid, Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin. 1 second. If there'd be a real wind, would the candles be able to be lit? No. They'll blow out. So the halacha is hadlaka osa mitzvah. The mitzvah is that first moment when you light it. So if I light a menorah, which had enough oil to burn for a half hour, and it goes out 5 seconds later, was I yotze the mitzvah? Yes, hadlaka osa mitzvah. All that we care about is that first moment. So Frekter B'Shua Leib Diskin, so how does it work? When I'm lighting it, the moment I'm lighting it, the box is open. The box is open means a wind could come in. If a wind could come in, then how's that considered a valid lighting? This is not a menorah, this is not a hadlaka, which could last for 30 minutes. In the way it is. A fascinating halachic question that Tzvi Pesach Frank, and he goes on through his thing to provide a heter for such a thing. But you wouldn't have a menorah outside on Hanukkah, perhaps, if not for such a heter. Fascinating. These are just, I could go through. I asked a certain Rav, when I say Tzvi Pesach Frank, what do you think of? So he told me two other, small, interesting halachas. The halacha of a woman makes a shechianu, we say, when she lights Yom Tov candles. That's when she makes her shechianu. It's an interesting debate. Okay, so then the husband makes kiddush and says shechianu. She doesn't need that shechianu because she was already yotze by her candle lighting. Does she answer amen on his shechianu? Many, I believe, Ramosha say yes. Tzvi Pesach Frank says no, that'll be a hefsek. She was yotze that bracha already. She's going to utter that. That's a hefsek. One Rav, the mention of Tzvi Pesach Frank says that. Somebody else told me this morning, I say with Tzvi Pesach Frank, he's like, that's the heter for powdered non-Chol Yisrael milk. Even those who keep Chol Yisrael, the Tzvi Pesach Frank famously has a heter for powdered milk that wasn't included in the Gzera. You don't have to be worried that they might switch cow milk to non-kosher milk in the powdered form. So powdered milk, you don't have to worry about Chol Yisrael, which is a major, major heter. It means, most things, most products that are manufactured with powdered milk. So you can, Krispy Kreme donuts. That's Tzvi Pesach Frank will give you a heter to eat a Krispy Kreme donut, even if you keep Chol Yisrael. Okay, boy, if I said that at the beginning of the share, hoo-ha. But anyway, he gives a heter. We had one last week too, to knock down a fruit tree for a tzarech. Tzvi Pesach Frank has a very interesting psak halacha on wheelchairs on Shabbos. To be machmer against wheelchairs. Very interesting, but I'm not telling you.
What is it, tzarech?
What would be?
Tree for a tzarech?
Yeah, so let's say you're building a shul.
Oh.
So to knock down, you would say that we could go through more different piskei halacha. Yeah. I was sitting in, don't ask, in Las Vegas, Nevada over Pesach. My kids went to a thing. I had a sefer with Tzvi Pesach Frank. Already on Chol Pesach, I was thinking about giving a share in him. And I jotted down in the back of a receipt, 20 different halachas, fascinating I found from him. I want to end with one other aspect. If you look in your sheets, I already gave two things. I gave the introduction to the sefer, and I gave you the first part of the sefer. The introduction to the sefer blew my mind. I'll read it inside. I'll do justice. I'll read maybe the second paragraph first. Go back to the first paragraph. Bottom right side. Mishnas hamabil aretz vatirad. This is basically the time of World War I broke out. B'tishi l'chodesh Av, on the 9th of Av. Hayom Amar Nemar Ashabol Hishlach Mishmaim Eretz Teferes Yisrael Uvol Ira Shnei Chabanos and Naros. Tisha B'Av, obviously we know, is the day that the two Batei Mikdash were destroyed. Yichari Batei Mikdash Nizad Teferes Beis Yisrael Boba Yom Hartza B'Mali Uza V'Nara Usa Hamalchama Olamas Rishon. The beginning of World War I, saying over, began on Tisha B'Av.
Assassination.
Yeah.
It's not the beginning of the war.
Okay, but a trigger point. A trigger. Okay, we'll hack this story.
Okay.
This part.
Asher Tilas Eretz HaKodesh Acharev. And the World War I, and it was talked about before the shir began, and they have vivid descriptions in here. Unfortunately, the old yishuv in Eretz Yisrael was destroyed during that war. There was no funds coming in. It was super poor, and they say
Before World War One, 50,000 Jews in Yerushalayim. After World War I, 25,000.
so. They say so. That means some probably left, but they say tens of thousands of Yidden died of starvation. They didn't know. And Tzvi Pesach Frank was living in Yerushalayim at that time, and he talks about him selling everything he had, basically, just to keep going. So you imagine that scene. Eretz Yisrael is ravaging from hunger. The world is going into a period of World War I, which we know was the precursor for World War II. Such a chorban that begins on Tisha B'Av. What was Tzvi Pesach Frank doing at that time? He was learning. He was trying to, obviously, the best of his ability to learn. But listen to what he was learning. Chidush neflam sharabeinu. Going back to the first paragraph. Haposkum ravcha delosa shari admon hakodesh v'amikdash nilmudu v'nechadshu b'rom tamsa shalom alev torah shalamanu taba'af b'mei evra v'zam mitzara b'mei mahumas v'mechuza masa umariva. This sefer Mikdash Melech, which I'll show you in a moment what he writes, is a sefer all about the halachas of the Beis HaMikdash. That's what he was learning when Yerushalayim was being destroyed. And they later published the Sefer. It was a best-selling Sefer all across Eretz Yisrael. While Yerushalayim is being destroyed, what's Tzvi Pesach Frank learning about? Rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. He quotes the pasuk, beautiful pasuk, Sholu Shalom Yerushalayim, Yishol Oyavav. Well, ask for the Shalom of Yerushalayim. What did the Rav Yerushalayim write about? Writes in there that we all know that we have no karbanos nowadays. But it's clear from Chazal, if you learn about the karbanos, it's considered in some way as if you were makar of them, as if you brought them. And even when the karbanos are not functional, there's an inyan to learn about them. So Tzvi Pesach Frank says, okay, that's the karbanos. That Chazal clearly says. Is there an inyan, is there a point nowadays to learn about the Beis HaMikdash in general? Not the karbanos, per se, the Beis HaMikdash. You don't find in any Chazal, he was a baki. Beferish, that one should learn about the Beis HaMikdash. So he darshans this pasuk, Sholu Shalom Yerushalayim, like Sholem v'darshan. If you have to learn about the karbanos that were in the Beis HaMikdash, but the ikar is the makom. The kedusha comes from the Beis HaMikdash itself. So kol shekain, you have to learn about the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore he spent his time. Different people deal with challenges in different ways. The world, you're sitting there in Yerushalayim. Think about it. Think about what this man went through. He encouraged the Slobodka Yeshiva to move to Eretz Yisrael. They go to Hebron and they're massacred. He's sitting there in Yerushalayim, and there's tragedy. There's death and destruction everywhere. Besides that, yeah, he was aware of the political nature. And there were fights and there were this. He saw the War of Independence. He lived a life where he saw so much struggle, so much challenge for the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. But what was his mind on? What was he learning about? What was he teaching? Writing a sefer about? Rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. Such an amazing, strong personality. And I think it's a beautiful lesson for us. We live in a world of chaos and destruction. But learning Torah and learning about what the Torah says that our future will be is such a powerful, invigorating force. It gives a person the strength to, the world, look who's running our country. I'm sorry to say, right? Check into a nursing home, unfortunately. But look at the world. Look at the world. The world's in chaos. Eretz Yisrael have been in a war, and who knows what's on the horizon. But Mikdash Melech, you want to learn about the Beis HaMikdash, you want to learn halacha from all sources of people. Look at what one man accomplished with Tzvi Pesach Frank. Tei Zichra Baruch. Thank you very much for listening.